The last person Emily expected to see on her porch that rainy evening was her brother-in-law, Jake. She hadn't seen him in over a year, not since her wedding to Mark, Jake's older brother. Back then, Jake was the easygoing charmer of the family, always smiling, always joking, but with a restlessness in his eyes that made Emily wonder what he was running from. Now, standing under the drizzle with a small suitcase in hand, he looked different, quieter, more tired. "Hey, he said, forcing a small grin. "Mind if I crash here for a bit?" Mark wasn't home yet. He was on a late shift at the hospital, so Emily hesitated. She didn't know why Jake was here or what had happened, but his voice carried something fragile, something that made her step aside. "Of course," she said softly. "Come in. You're soaked." Jake gave a grateful nod and stepped into the warmth of their home. As she led him to the guest room, she noticed how his usual confidence had vanished. He didn't joke, didn't talk much, just thanked her quietly when she brought him a towel and some tea. They sat in silence for a while, the sound of rain filling the space between them. Finally, Emily asked, "Did something happen?" Jake looked down at his mug. "Yeah," he said after a long pause. "You could say that. I just needed to get away for a while." Something in his voice made her drop the question. Later that night, Mark came home and was surprised to find his brother asleep on the couch. "What's he doing here?" he asked, setting his bag down. "He showed up out of nowhere," Emily said. "Said he needed a place to stay." Mark sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Typical Jake, always landing somewhere unexpected. But there wasn't much else to say. They let him stay. Days passed, and Jake started to come out of his shell again. He helped around the house, fixed the broken porch light, cooked breakfast when Emily was too tired. He even made Mark laugh again, something Emily hadn't seen much lately. But as she watched the brothers joke over coffee, she couldn't ignore the quiet heaviness that still lingered in Jake's eyes. Something deeper than a rough patch. One afternoon, while folding laundry, Emily overheard Jake on the phone in the guest room. His tone was tense. "I told you I'm figuring it out," he said. "Just give me a little more time." There was silence. Then Jake muttered, "I said I'll pay it back. I promise." When Emily heard the door open, she quickly turned away, pretending not to have noticed. Jake smiled faintly, though his eyes were clouded. That evening, she told Mark about it. "I think Jake's in some kind of trouble," she said carefully. "I don't know what it is, but—" He sounded worried. Mark frowned. "He's always getting into something. Probably money again. Do you think we should ask him?" "Not yet," Mark said. "He'll tell me when he's ready." But Jake didn't. Instead, over the next week, Emily began noticing small things: missed calls, unopened mail, a faded bruise on his arm. He brushed it off when she asked, saying he'd just bumped into something. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't safe. One night, when Mark was working late again, Emily found Jake sitting on the porch steps, staring out into the dark yard. "You okay?" she asked gently. He glanced up at her, his expression softening. "Yeah, just trying to clear my head." She sat beside him, wrapping her sweater tighter against the wind. "You don't have to go through whatever this is alone, you know." Jake exhaled slowly. "You sound like Mark. Maybe because we both care about you." He smiled faintly, but didn't reply. The silence stretched, calm but heavy. Then he whispered, almost to himself, "It's not just about me anymore." Emily turned to him. "What do you mean?" Before he could answer, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway made him stand abruptly. "Nothing," he said quickly, forcing a smile. "Forget I said that." Mark stepped out of the car, waving as he approached. Jake disappeared inside before his brother could say anything. Emily stood there for a long moment, feeling that quiet unease grow stronger. Something about Jake's visit wasn't just random. It felt like a storm was gathering, one that might touch all of them. If you're enjoying this story so far, please like the video and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. That night, as she turned off the lights, Emily heard Jake's phone buzzing again behind his closed door. And this time, She thought she heard him whisper a name she didn't recognize. A name that would soon change everything. The next morning, Emily woke to the sound of raised voices coming from the kitchen. She hurried downstairs and found Mark and Jake at the table. Jake's hands were clenched, and Mark's face was pale with frustration. "You can't just show up like this and expect everything to disappear," Mark said sharply. "I'm not asking for that," Jake replied. "I just need time." "Time for what? To clean up another one of your messes?" Jake pushed back his chair, his voice low. "You have no idea what's going on, Mark." "Then make me understand," Mark said, his tone softening slightly. "I'm your brother," but Jake stayed silent. He grabbed his jacket and left, the door slamming behind him. Emily stood there, unsure what to say. Mark rubbed his forehead. "He's in trouble again. I can feel it. Did he tell you anything?" she asked. "Nothing. Just said he owes someone money." That afternoon, Jake didn't come home. His phone went straight to voicemail. By nightfall, Emily was pacing the living room, glancing at the window every few minutes. When Jake finally returned close to midnight, his face looked drawn, his eyes red. She met him at the door. "Where were you?" "Out," he said shortly, brushing past her. "Jake," she said quietly, "we're worried about you." He froze at the stairs but didn't turn around. "Don't be. I'll figure it out." But the next day, when Emily went out to get the mail, she noticed a black car parked a few houses down. Inside, 2 men sat watching the house. Her stomach tightened. She hurried back inside and found Jake in the kitchen. "Do you know anything about a black car outside?" The color drained from his face. "They're here? Who?" He didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed his jacket again. "I need to make a call." "Jake, please," Emily said, grabbing his arm. "You can't keep running like this." He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw the fear in his eyes. "I didn't mean for any of this to reach you and Mark. I swear I didn't." "Then tell me what's happening." Jake hesitated, then whispered, "I borrowed money from the wrong people. I thought I could pay it back fast, but it spiraled. And now they want it, or something worse." Emily's heart pounded. "Does Mark know?" "No, and you can't tell him, please." "Jake, he's your brother." "He deserves to know." He shook his head. "If he gets involved, they'll come for him too." Before Emily could respond, the front door opened and Mark walked in. Jake's expression changed instantly. Fear replaced by forced calm. "Everything okay here?" Mark asked, setting down his bag. "Yeah," Jake said quickly. "Just talking about dinner plans." Mark nodded slowly but didn't look convinced. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay awake, listening to the faint creak of the floorboards as Jake paced the hallway. The next morning, the black car was gone. But the tension in the house only grew. Jake barely spoke during breakfast. Mark kept throwing him wary glances. Emily tried to keep peace between them, but it felt like holding back an avalanche. By evening, she found Jake sitting on the porch again, a duffel bag at his feet. "You're leaving?" she asked softly. He nodded. "I can't stay here. If I do, you and Mark could get hurt. You can't just disappear, Jake. Running won't solve it." He smiled sadly. "It's the only thing I'm good at." "Where will you go?" He looked out at the fading light. "Somewhere far enough. Maybe to start over." Emily's voice trembled. "You don't have to do this alone." He looked at her for a long moment, then whispered, "Tell Mark I'm sorry." Before she could stop him, he walked down the steps and disappeared into the night. Hours later, Mark found the duffel bag still sitting on the porch, untouched. Emily's chest tightened as she realized Jake had left everything behind except his wallet and phone. Something about it didn't feel right. 2 days later, a letter arrived in the mail addressed to Mark. It wasn't handwritten. It was printed, brief, and unsigned. Mark read it, then looked at Emily, his face pale. "What is it?" she asked. He swallowed hard. "It says, 'If you want your brother back, don't call the police.'" Emily's breath caught. The words felt like ice. Jake hadn't just left. He'd been taken. Mark's hands trembled as he held the letter. The short message said everything and nothing all at once. Emily stared at it, her heart pounding. "This can't be real," she whispered. Mark looked up at her, his voice tight. "Jake's in danger, Em. I should have known something like this would happen." She stepped closer. "We can still fix this. We just have to be smart." Mark read the letter again, every line cutting deeper. "Don't call the police. Why would they say that unless they're watching us?" Emily's eyes darted toward the window. The street was empty, too quiet. The same black car from before was gone, but the memory of it sent a chill through her. Mark sat down, burying his face in his hands. "He's my brother. I should have been there for him." "You couldn't have known," she said softly. "Jake didn't want you to." He looked up, his eyes full of guilt. "That's the problem. He never lets anyone help until it's too late." The letter had no contact information, no instructions. Just that one haunting line. For hours they sat in silence, wondering what to do. Finally, Emily said, "Maybe they'll reach out again. Maybe they want money." Mark nodded slowly. "If it's ransom, I'll find a way. I don't care what it takes." The next morning, Mark left early to talk to a friend who worked in private security. Emily stayed home feeling restless. Around noon, a text came through on the home phone, an unknown number. It read, "Stay out of it. He owes what he owes. This is between us." Her fingers trembled as she called Mark. They messaged. "They know we're waiting." He was quiet for a long time. "I'm coming home. Don't answer anything. Don't go outside." When Mark returned, he had a man with him, a tall, quiet investigator named Ethan who specialized in missing person cases. Ethan read the message, then nodded grimly. "They're watching the house." "That's clear." But they slipped. "Sending a message means we can trace the number." For the first time in days, hope flickered in Emily's chest. Ethan worked fast. Within hours, he tracked the number to an industrial area outside of town. Mark wanted to go immediately, but Ethan stopped him. "Not yet. If these people are dangerous, we can't just walk in. Let me scout it first." That night was long and sleepless. Emily sat by the window staring into the dark yard. Around 2 a.m, Mark came downstairs and joined her. "Do you think he's okay?" she whispered. Mark's voice cracked. "I don't know. But I can't lose him, Em. No matter what he did." The next day, Ethan returned with an update. "I found the place," he said. "A warehouse near the docks." "I saw Jake. He's alive." Emily covered her mouth in relief. "Then we can get him back?" Ethan hesitated. "There's more. They're not just holding him. They're using him." Mark frowned. "What do you mean?" Ethan looked between them. "Jake's working for them, under pressure. I think they're forcing him to move something. Maybe money, maybe information. Whatever it is, he's scared." Emily's stomach turned. "He's being blackmailed?" "Looks that way. But if we act too fast, they could disappear with him." Mark stood up, his voice firm. "Then we need a plan," Ethan nodded. "Give me one more day. I'll find out who's behind this." That evening, Emily sat alone in the kitchen, staring at Jake's empty coffee mug still on the counter. She couldn't stop thinking about their last conversation. The way he'd said, "It's not just about me anymore." What had he meant by that? Before bed, she checked her phone again. Another text had arrived. "Tell Mark to back off, or we'll make sure Jake disappears for good." Her breath caught. The text came just 5 minutes ago. She ran to the window. A car was idling at the corner of their street. Its headlights flicked once, then went dark. When Mark came down, she showed him the phone. His jaw tightened. "They're watching us again. We should tell Ethan." He nodded, already dialing. "We can't let them control this anymore." By morning, Ethan was gone to meet one of his contacts at the docks. But that afternoon, when he didn't return his calls, Mark's worry turned to fear. Emily sat at the table, twisting her hands. What if they found out? Mark didn't answer. He was staring at his phone, a new message flashing on the screen. It was a photo. Jake sitting in a dark room, his hands tied. His face bruised but alive, and below it, one chilling line. Midnight. Come alone. Mark's throat tightened as he whispered. They want me. Emily's voice trembled. Mark, you can't go. But his eyes were set with quiet resolve. He's my brother, Em. I have to. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, and the wind howled through the trees. Emily knew something terrible was coming, and there was no stopping it now. By 10 that night, the storm had rolled in. The rain came in sheets, drumming against the windows as Emily watched Mark pull on his jacket. You don't have to do this alone, she said, her voice breaking. He cupped her face, trying to steady her. If they see you, they'll think we called for help. I can't risk that. But what if something happens? He gave her a faint, tired smile. Then at least Jake won't be alone. She wanted to argue, to stop him, but the look in his eyes silenced her. Mark was terrified, but determined. The kind of quiet courage that comes from love. By 11:30, he was gone. Emily sat on the couch, staring at the clock, every tick louder than the storm outside. Her mind replayed everything, the letter, the texts, the photo. Every detail burned into her memory. Minutes dragged into hours. At 11:55, she called Ethan's number again, hoping he'd pick up. No answer. Then, at 11:58, her phone buzzed. A message from Mark. I'm here. Warehouse 3. I see Jake. Her heart leapt, but the next message made her freeze. Something's wrong. They're not alone. Then silence. Emily stared at the screen, praying for another message that never came. At 12:15, unable to take it anymore, she grabbed her keys and ran into the storm. The drive to the docks felt endless. The rain blurred the road and thunder shook the sky. When she finally saw the row of old warehouses, her stomach tightened. Everything was dark except one building with a faint light flickering inside. She parked far enough away to stay hidden, clutching her phone. Her hands were shaking as she texted Mark. I'm here. Please answer. No reply. She crept closer, her shoes sinking in puddles. Through a broken window, she saw shadows moving, 4, maybe 5 men, and then she saw him, Jake, tied to a chair. His head hung low. Mark stood nearby, his hands raised, talking to one of the men, a tall figure in a dark coat. Emily couldn't hear the words over the rain, but she could see Mark's pleading gestures. Then the tall man stepped forward, grabbed Mark by the collar and shoved him back. Jake jerked against the ropes, shouting something she couldn't make out. Emily's pulse roared in her ears. She had to do something. Her eyes darted around until she spotted a heavy metal bar near the door. She picked it up, her hands slick with rain. Inside, one of the men turned toward the window, spotting movement. Hey! He shouted. Emily ducked, heart racing. Everything happened fast after that. Shouts echoed inside. A crash. A scuffle. She pushed open the side door, slipping inside just as lightning lit up the room. Mark had tackled one of the men, while Jake struggled against the ropes. The tall man turned toward Emily, surprise flashing across his face. Who the hell? Before he could finish, she swung the bar hard against the light switch panel. Sparks flew and the warehouse plunged into darkness. Chaos broke out. Shouts, footsteps, confusion. She felt someone grab her arm, and for a moment, she thought it was over. But then she heard Jake's voice, hoarse but clear. Emily, this way! He'd managed to break free. She stumbled toward the sound, reaching out until she felt his hand. Together they ran through the maze of crates, the rain roaring outside. Behind them, someone shouted, "Stop them!" They burst out the back door into the storm, soaked and breathless. But Mark wasn't with them. Emily turned back. We can't leave him! Jake shook his head, coughing hard. He's buying us time. Jake! Before she could finish, a loud crash echoed from inside, followed by Mark's voice yelling, Go, Em! Run! Jake pulled her toward the car and they drove off, water spraying beneath the tires. Emily's hands were trembling on the wheel. For miles, neither of them spoke. When they finally stopped at a gas station, Emily turned to him. What were they after, Jake? What did you get yourself into? He stared out the window, his face pale. it started with a loan. But then they wanted favors, deliveries, no questions asked. I didn't know what was inside until it was too late. She swallowed hard. And now Mark's in there because of it. Tears filled his eyes. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. She clenched the steering wheel. We have to go back. Jake looked at her, desperate. If we do, none of us might make it out. But Emily's voice was steady now. We can't just leave him. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the road back toward the docks. In that instant, she made her choice. She turned the car around. The storm had eased, but the night still felt alive with tension. Emily gripped the steering wheel, her heart pounding as the car sped back toward the docks. Jake sat beside her, silent, his jaw tight. Every few seconds he glanced back, as if expecting headlights to appear behind them. Are you sure about this? He asked quietly. Emily's voice was firm. Mark's still in there. I'm not leaving him. The closer they got, the heavier the air felt, like the world itself was holding its breath. When they reached the warehouse, the front door was wide open. The lights inside flickered weakly. Emily parked behind a stack of containers, grabbed her phone, and turned on the flashlight. The floor was scattered with broken glass and crates. A trail of muddy footprints led deeper inside. Mark? She called softly. No answer. Only the soft drip of rain through a leaky roof. Then a faint groan echoed from the far side of the room. Emily and Jake followed the sound. Behind a stack of old barrels, they found Mark, on the floor, bruised but breathing. She dropped beside him, tears of relief streaming down her face. Mark! It's me, he blinked, disoriented. You shouldn't be here. Jake knelt beside him, his voice trembling. I'm sorry, man. I'm so sorry. Mark managed a faint smile. You always did know how to bring chaos with you. Emily helped them both up. We need to get out before anyone comes back. They made their way toward the exit, but as they reached the door, a voice echoed from the shadows. Going somewhere? The tall man stepped out, blocking their path. His coat was soaked, his face hard with anger. Jake froze. Please, it's over. I'll pay you back. Just let them go. The man shook his head slowly. You had your chance. Emily's breath caught. There was nowhere left to run. Then headlights flashed through the open door, 2 vehicles pulling up fast. For a split second, everyone froze. Then came the sound of sirens. The tall man cursed and bolted toward the back. Emily turned to Jake, wide-eyed. You called the police? He shook his head, stunned. No, I swear. Moments later, officers burst through the entrance, shouting for everyone to get down. Within minutes, the men who had taken Jake were in handcuffs, and the warehouse was flooded with light. Mark leaned against a crate, exhausted but safe. Emily wrapped her arms around him, finally letting the tears fall. When the chaos settled, Ethan appeared, bruised but alive. You didn't think I'd leave you hanging, did you? He said with a tired grin. Mark looked at him in disbelief. You brought the police? Ethan nodded. Once I realized who those men were, I called in a favor. I just didn't get to you fast enough. Jake looked at him, guilt shadowing his eyes. I don't deserve this. Any of it. Ethan studied him for a moment. You made mistakes, sure. But you also came clean. That counts for something. When dawn broke, the storm had passed. The 3 of them sat on the curb outside the warehouse, wrapped in blankets from the paramedics. Jake stared at the rising sun. I'll face whatever comes next, he said quietly. I'm done running. Mark placed a hand on his shoulder. You're still my brother. We'll get through it. Emily smiled faintly. Together this time. There was a long silence, the kind that comes when words aren't enough. Weeks later, the house felt different, calmer. The fear that once lingered had faded into something gentler. Gratitude. Jake stayed with them for a while, attending meetings, trying to rebuild his life. Mark supported him, never once bringing up the past. One evening, as the sun set, Jake came to the porch where Emily was sitting. I've been thinking, he said softly. You could have walked away. Both of you could have. But you didn't, Emily smiled. Family isn't about walking away when things get hard. It's about staying, even when it hurts. Jake nodded, his eyes glistening. Thank you. For everything. She looked out at the fading light. Just promise me one thing. What's that? Don't ever disappear again. Jake chuckled quietly. Deal. That night, as rain began to fall again, Emily closed her eyes and let the sound wash over her. The storm had passed, and though the scars would stay, so would the love that had carried them through it. Because sometimes what saves a family isn't perfection. It's forgiveness. And for Emily, Mark, and Jake, that was enough.